Devaluation. Different appliances. People are seen as objects by us and hence are referred to as appliances to get you to understand that you're dehumanized as part of the way that we view you and control you. And, therefore, there are different appliances in the fuel matrix. There is the IPPS, the Intimate Partner Primary Source, the NIPPS, the Non-Intimate Partner Primary Source. There is the Intimate Partner Secondary Source of the Shelf Variety, the IPSS, or the Dirty Little Secret, or the Shelf Variety, the DLS. That's also, to give the DLS its longest title, the Dirty Little Secret Intimate Partner Secondary Source. So they're a secondary source, they're intimate, but Dirty Little Secret aptly describes them. There are non-intimate secondary sources. Friends, family, colleagues. There are non-intimate tertiary sources and intimate tertiary sources. And those are individuals which are appliances within the fuel matrix of the narcissist. But how does the narcissist treat them when it comes to devaluation? Is everybody devalued in the same way, or are there differences? Devaluation. This period of the narcissistic dynamic is regarded as always being part of the dynamic, and quite naturally the worst part of it. Those who consider it as an ever-present part of the dynamic, however, are overstating its presence, because whether devaluation appears at all and if it does, how it will manifest depends very much on the nature of the dynamic with our appliances, namely, where do you fit into the fuel matrix? Let us begin with the tertiary source. Most of the time, our engagement with tertiary sources, strangers and acquaintances, don't include any devaluation. There are two main reasons for this. One, the engagement is brief. We either engage with a tertiary source once for a short time and never again, or we engage with them repeatedly, but it is only ever brief in nature. So an example of that might be if I went to a restaurant and the waitress served me. She is a non-intimate tertiary source, and I may never go to that restaurant ever again, or I may return there and she no longer works there. So she, as a non-intimate tertiary source, was only interacted with on that one-off occasion. Alternatively, let us say I buy my daily newspaper from a particular kiosk. Then the gentleman that sells them, I deal with briefly every working day in the week for 30 seconds or less as I purchase a copy of the Times and pay him. That is a repeated interaction with a non-intimate tertiary source. The second reason why there doesn't tend to be any devaluation is the needs of the facade, where mid-range, greater or ultra, meaning that engaging with the tertiary source is in a benign way, and that is the most effective way of proceeding with that individual, either just the once or through repeated short one-off engagements. It is the case, however, that tertiary sources are devalued. They will be insulted, ignored, triangulated with other superior ranking appliances within the fuel matrix. This devaluation may be because the tertiary source has ignited our fury. For instance, somebody working in a bar fails to serve us ahead of somebody else. But the devaluation may just occur because we regard it as an expedient response. For instance, we see that it would draw amusement or admiration from our friends, non-intimate secondary sources, if we pour scorn on a homeless person in the street or we insult the waitress in a restaurant. Neither of these people have necessarily criticised us, but given the lack of emotional empathy that the narcissist has, the sense of entitlement and no accountability towards that person and their feelings means that they are entirely expendable. And by devaluing them, we are able to gain negative fuel from them and positive fuel from other sources and thus control both sets within the fuel matrix. Any devaluation of a tertiary source is short in duration. It's a burst of negative fuel and it's not hugely potent. Indeed, the admiration from the secondary or primary source which it brings about is far more potent when compared to other sources, and the quantity of fuel that will be provided by this tertiary source is low. This is because the tertiary source will not be bound to us, and therefore after a period of time of responding in a manner which provides negative fuel, the tertiary source, more often than not, will walk away. The period of devaluation for a tertiary source may be less than a minute if they provide negative fuel and then back off. Of course, if they continue to engage with us and provide challenge fuel, we will keep provoking them, and also asserting our perceived superiority over them in order to put them in their place, basically to assert control over them. We also, of course, can't have some upstart tertiary source making us look bad in front of other superior sources. It will threaten our control of those superior appliances also. We are unlikely to keep pursuing the tertiary source. Thus, if we upbraid a waiter and he returns to the kitchen, we are unlikely to follow him and keep the devaluation going. Instead, we take the negative fuel from his angry reaction and let him withdraw. Note, we let him withdraw. Control rests with us. We consider it largely beneath us to keep pressing such an individual further. Of course, if the waiter then returns, he may well be devalued again, and we keep doing so for as long as he keeps appearing in front of us. It is unlikely that the tertiary source will be smeared as a consequence of this devaluation, because ultimately within our fuel matrix, the tertiary source is not of significant importance, and therefore we do not need to assert control over them indirectly through smearing. We may see this tertiary source on another occasion and provoke them again, or, pressing the reset button, we may engage with them in a benign fashion. It doesn't matter as to how we treated them on the previous interaction, because of the way we compartmentalise. What about secondary sources? Well, devaluation does occur, but if and when it does, it is for a reason which is invariably linked to the behaviour of the secondary source. If someone is a non-intimate secondary source, therefore they are a family member, friend or colleague, they will usually enjoy an elongated golden period. Devaluation of the secondary source will only occur where that individual has sought to expose us, challenge us, or has turned off the fuel supply completely. The devaluation will be longer than that experienced by the tertiary source because the secondary source will be bound more closely to us. This binding will be as a consequence of the nature of the relationship. The person is in our social circle with other people, they work with us, or they are in our family circle, but also because we will have put more effort into binding them to us. Accordingly, the secondary source is less likely to withdraw in the same way that a tertiary source would. Instead, the secondary source is more likely to want to try to find out why they are being treated this way, to seek to make amends and to gain our favour once more. Sometimes this devaluation occurs as a consequence of needing to send a signal to other secondary sources that they ought not to cross us, so that they realise it is preferable to remain loyal to us than cross us in some way. The secondary source who is devalued is likely to be smeared by us. We will want other secondary sources of the same circle or ilk to turn against the devalued secondary source, to agree with our smearing and thus enable us to indirectly assert control over the individual who's been smeared. We may wish to complete the isolation or ostracization of this secondary source that has caused offence by wounding or challenge fuel. We are, of course, conscious of the maintenance of the facade, greater or ultra consciously aware, unconsciously so, with regard to the mid-ranges. And therefore, we will look to present a reason for why the secondary source has fallen from favour, is no longer invited, is no longer welcome at certain gatherings and so forth. The period of devaluation for a secondary source varies in terms of the actual engagement of the period over which the person is regarded as black. If the secondary source wants to talk to us to find out why they are treated this way, we will keep devaluing them, so this might be a matter of minutes or a couple of hours. If they remain proximate to us and keep providing negative fuel, we will keep devaluing and provoking them, until such time as they provide negative fuel without challenging us. If they retreat and try to engage us on another occasion, they will remain black until they do something, or there is an external act which causes us to then regard them as white, and we welcome them back into the fold again with a benign hoover. For example, if the secondary source seeks forgiveness and has a residual benefit that we want, we will extend our graciousness to admit them into the circle once again. If we see no purpose, other than negative fuel, then they remain painted black, and they may well then be disengaged from, and we will find a replacement for them soon enough. In some instances, the secondary source may escape and have nothing more to do with us. Thus, a friend never socialises with us, the family member withdraws, or the colleague moves workplaces or department. Sometimes they may not have such an option, and instead they remain in effect a scapegoat for us, remaining black for years, and are devalued further each time there is any interaction with us. Thus, every time there is a family gathering, they will be subject to contemptuous comments, triangulation, possibly silent treatments. Of course, this long-lasting devaluation may be intermittent, as we may only see this secondary source at certain events or places. Similar to the tertiary source, we will rarely keep seeking out the secondary source to devalue him or her. Where the secondary source is of an intimate variety, either an IPSS or dirty little secret, then the dynamic alters. There are two potential forms of devaluation. The first is used as a corrective measure to bring the IPSS or DSI or dirty little secret back into line. This is the corrective devaluation. Accordingly, devaluation and disengagement are not a certainty, but instead, if the IPSS or dirty little secret responds favourably to this warning by way of the corrective devaluation, then it halts, we've got control of you again, and there'll be the reinstatement of the golden period. This is because the IPSS's or DLS's fuel is regarded as still valuable, isn't stale, and devaluation is used because they are not complying as they ought to do. They're threatening our control rather than as a consequence of the fuel going stale. This corrective devaluation brings them back into line, and thus the corrective devaluation halts. The second instance is where the IPSS or dirty little secret does not respond to the warning, and thus their failure and treachery means that they must now be punished as we head towards disengagement. The devaluation in this instance will be more intense than the corrective devaluation, but again it doesn't last for particularly long, because either the IPSS or dirty little secret stays out of our way, or if they don't, we want to turn to a different IPSS or dirty little secret or even find a new one, and therefore disengagement comes along very quickly. Finally, there is the IPPS. The intimate partner primary source is the person who suffers the longest devaluation, the harshest devaluation, and is the one that is recognised by most people. This is the sustained devaluation. This sustained devaluation happens because, 1. You promise to be the one. Your failure to live up to our infatuated ideals means that you are in effect punished, and we're not going to let you off the hook easily. 2. Your negative fuel is potent, plentiful, and frequent, and therefore we want to keep drawing that from you. 3. This negative fuel also provides contrast and the motivation for our seduction of your potential replacement. 4. You are bound to us, and therefore you are far less likely to actually withdraw from us, at least at first. This binding is both emotional and non-emotional. Emotionally, it arises because you want to return to the golden period. You want to make everything all right. You're a love devotee and you want love to have love triumph. You may well be a codependent empath. You may not want to admit defeat. And, of course, you are addicted to us. The non-emotional matters are things such as finances, children, house, family pressures, and so forth. And again, these are corrupted by your emotional thinking to cause you to stay and remain. The combination of these factors means that you cling to us, and because you most likely live with us, your devaluation occurs each and every day until there is a respite period. Number 5, we grant you respite periods. This takes place within the umbrella of the devaluation period and means that you are given renewed hope so that you stick around, hope being a manipulation that's used against you. And also it means that your potential for becoming numbed and unresponsive is reduced by these periods, which allow you to gather some degree of strength again. 6. The IPPS may be the only person in our fuel matrix who is being devalued, and this usually takes place behind closed doors to preserve the facade that is operated by mid-range, greater and ultra-narcissists, so there is less likelihood of external interference which will disrupt the devaluation towards you. For others, there is the risk of somebody noticing the behaviours, and therefore the facade acts to shorten the devaluation. The devaluation of the IPPS is the most brutal of all the devaluation of appliances. It continues for the longest, it can be for years, even decades in some instances. And within this devaluation comes a whole host of manipulations and abuses, which cover the emotional, the psychological, the financial, the sexual, and the physical. With a word also to the non-intimate partner primary source. These individuals don't tend to find themselves in sustained devaluation. The reason being, the golden period with them only lasts for a short time because the narcissist doesn't get rid of them in the sense of disengagement, but rather causes them to revert to non-intimate secondary source status. As a replacement to the intimate partner primary source, the non-intimate partner primary source is utilised, but it is unusual for that to be for a very long period of time, because the narcissist prefers to get an intimate partner primary source, and therefore the non-intimate partner primary source is a stopgap until that happens. And given the shortness of it, they invariably enjoy a golden period and then are moved to the golden period of the non-intimate secondary source. If there is an elongated golden period for the non-intimate partner primary source, they will go the same way as the intimate partner primary source, i.e. a sustained devaluation. But that is rare that ever happens. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.